Hey, I'm Marty Riemer. I was a disc jockey doing a morning show at KXRX in Seattle on April 8th, 1994, the day the news broke. And in fact, we were the ones who broke the news that Kurt Cobain had passed away.
Marty, welcome to Radioactiva, man. How are you?
Uh, Good. Yeah. I mean, we could probably meet on happy or for a happier reason, but I'm good.
Walk me through that morning 3 years ago today. I mean, how was it? You get to the radio station just like any other morning, and all of a sudden you received a call, you pick up the phone. What happened?
Well, yeah, let me just backtrack just a smidge. The radio station I worked at was at one time an extremely popular rock radio station in Seattle, and as I don't know how it is in Colombia, but in the U.S. the radio business shifts a great deal, and we had been told just a few weeks before that our station was changing format, that we were going from rock to being a country station. And the reason I mention that is because uh, the regular morning show, the duo that did the morning show on KXRX, they had already left. They said, we want nothing to do with country. All of us had told we were going to be fired at the end of this, few week transition. So we were in this weird limbo state at the radio station where nothing really mattered because we were going to lose our jobs anyhow. And we were just playing, the songs that we like to play and having a good time on the air. And that was kind of the environment in the studio when I was at the time doing news with a disc jockey partner. His name was Bo Roberts, great rock DJ. He's passed on now, but and he and I were doing a show, and the phone rang, and this guy said, "Hey, I have got the story of the century for you. I work for an electrical contractor. One of my guys has found Kurt Cobain, and he's shot himself." And we thought, okay, nut on line two, we'll hang up. Boom, gone. Didn't pay him any heed. And then 10 seconds later, he calls back again and says, "Don't hang up on me. This is for real. This is such a big story. I believe Pink Floyd was coming to town in the next few weeks. And he said, you're going to owe me some Pink Floyd tickets." And we're like, would you leave us alone? We're trying to do a radio show here. Just be gone. And we let him go. But on that second call, he gave us some more details. He said, the body's lying there. There's a shotgun next to him. And so, but still, we didn't pay it any heed, hung up on him. And then he called our front desk, and the receptionist comes in and goes, "We got this guy on the line who says he has some news about Kurt Cobain." And we thought, God, this is not your typical prank phone call. He is sticking to his story. So our producer on the side quickly called the Seattle Police Department and said, "Do you have any news about Kurt Cobain?" Because the feeling we had was if something this momentous had happened, we would not be the first to be hearing of it. Like, I mean, everyone would be talking about it. So,
Of course.
like, that's why this guy is nuts. And the Seattle police told our producer, "We've dispatched a cruiser to the home of Kurt Cobain. That's all we can say at this point." And as soon as we got that bit of information confirmed, now we thought, look, that guy was way too detailed in his description of what was going on for the whole thing to be a complete hoax. Although I'll have you know that at the time we still thought it was something else, that maybe at the worst case scenario, a fan of Nirvana's had committed suicide at Cobain's home to show his allegiance, or something along that line. Or there was a dummy laying there because he said that the electrician had walked by the window and looked in. So we thought, well, maybe it's not even a real person. But we went on the air and said, we have preliminary reports that Seattle police have been dispatched to the home of Kurt Cobain. An electrician who was working on an alarm system there claims that he may be the victim of a suicide. So we made it all sound very, tentative and vague, and it could be true, it could not be. And
Okay.
everything blew up at that point. mean, to the point that we were scared out of our wits. What had we unleashed here? The phones lit up, but not a typical, like, radio station, the phones lighting up. We were getting calls from Germany and South America and Japan, and what are the details and what do you know? And at that point, we still didn't believe it to be true, because it would be such a wild, huge story. Yeah, if you'd asked me then, there's no way I would have said 30 years later we'd be talking about what we had just said on the air.
But of course, looking back, you have information that you probably didn't have by the time. But I've read that Kurt was lost, like, for a few days, right? You knew about that?
No, we didn't know anything. We weren't following his comings and goings. We knew about the incident in Rome, where he had been. So that made news in Seattle, as it did, I think, elsewhere in the world, that he had been checked into a hospital for a drug overdose. And we also knew that the tour that they were on, because I believe the last show they played was in Munich, Germany, in the Munich area. We heard that tour had been canceled, and that he'd entered a drug rehab, but we didn't know. So the drug rehab program he entered was down in Los Angeles, but we had no idea that he'd fled there. I think few people did. His family was looking for him, but beyond that, it was not at all news. So again, when the last you hear is that the guy had checked into rehab in Southern California, the last thing you're going to think is that, oh yeah, well, a body that's found in Seattle is going to be him. So again, skeptical is what we were at best. As soon as we were, our show ended at 10 o'clock in the morning, Seattle time. It was a really, like, if you know anything about Seattle and the cliche of the weather in Seattle, it was that kind of a day. It was gray and drizzly, and the cloud deck was, just below your eyes. So everything was, kind of foggy and wet. And we got the news around, if I remember correctly, around 9:15. And then at 10 o'clock, our show was over. And as soon as the show was done, we jumped in a car and drove down to his house, which was probably, 15 minutes from the radio studios. And I don't know how much you know or how much you care to know, but the house where he committed suicide is in a very upscale part of Seattle, which has a lot of, at the time, not as many wealthy people as live there now. I think Bezos hadn't quite become the richest person in the world yet and moved to Seattle. But Bill Gates was there, by God. So it was a really, but totally not like what you'd expect Kurt Cobain to call home. So again, it was all this stuff that just, the puzzle pieces just didn't fit. But we pulled up to this house, and there was a small gathering of a little bit of couple television crews, a couple police cruisers. It was cordoned off with the crime scene tape. And you looked up this hill, the driveway, and there was the big house, this Gothic gray structure sitting there. And then next to that was the house, the garden house where he committed suicide. What's wild is there's a park right next to it, so you can wander just a few feet down the street, walk up this part, and then you can look right down onto the garden house, which now is no longer there. But so at the time, you could just like look down and see the police, but it just was an eerie, creepy, like a haunted vibe.
And when did you get confirmation that it was Kurt indeed?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, before we left the radio studio, we were fairly convinced that it was a true story. So sometime in that 45 minutes between making the announcement and us leaving the radio station, we knew that Kurt indeed had committed suicide.
Have you ever interviewed him before?
No, never. Kurt spoke to Dave Grohl and Chris Novoselic. They were sort of if you think about it, Nirvana was this, counterculture, anti-establishment the whole grunge scene was that in Seattle, and commercial radio was the antithesis of that. That was what they were fighting against. We would always play Nirvana next to, like, I mean, at the time, probably not so much, but I'm trying to think of bands that, like Journey and Styx, and that was what they hated, So I think from Kurt's view, we were a little bit the enemy, but the record label knew that they had to have friends in radio, and so it was Dave Grohl and Chris Novoselic who would go out and do the glad handing, and yeah, they were very affable characters, but Kurt kind of scared us.
Okay, and what happened the day after? Okay, the day of the news came, you went to the house, you got the confirmation. What happened next?
Well, what happened next was even before the day after. Went back to the radio station, and that's when you realized truly what an impact this story had on the world. The phones were off the hook at the radio station, because when we broke the news, the Associated Press, does that mean anything to you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Associated Press picked up the story and put and this is why I'm talking to you 30 years, put my name and the radio station name on the story, said reported by Marty Riemer, KXRX Seattle. And because KXRX was attached to the story, and because my name was attached, suddenly we were bombarded with media about, like, what do you know? I vividly remember I was flying somewhere the next day, and I was at the Seattle airport on the phone talking to a Rolling Stone magazine reporter, and he was asking me the strangest questions. Like, he was like, "So, what do you think his body looked like?" And I was like, "I have no idea. I'm sure not good." I mean, because not only did he shoot himself with a shotgun, but it was 3 days after he was presumed to have done it that his body was discovered. So yeah, I mean, it was a few days ago that everyone was talking about the 30th anniversary, but 3 days ago, nobody knew that Kurt Cobain had already passed on.
Were you a fan?
Oh yeah. I mean, I was a fan of the entire scene. Seattle is this, I mean, it's a beautiful city and has certainly made a name for itself in the last 30 years. But, 30 years ago, I would have to say we in Seattle, music DJs in Seattle that played Seattle music, were never quite sure, was this just, we're playing it because it's our backyard and we love this stuff? Or is it actually, world accepted by the world? Just the other day, I was on vacation in Spain, and a little girl, like 12 years old, was wearing a Nirvana sweatshirt. And I was like, if only we'd known, and by God, if Kurt, were still with us and saw a 12-year-old girl in Spain wearing a Nirvana sweatshirt, the whole thing would be surreal for him.
I guess I have to ask too, what do you think Kurt would be doing in this day and age if he didn't committed suicide?
Oh yeah, that is a good question. What would he be doing? I was good friends with Chris Cornell of Soundgarden, the lead singer, frontman for Soundgarden, who has also sadly passed on. And Chris Cornell was always, a much more affable, friendly, type. And he was, up until the day he died, he was still very musically relevant. And as is, Dave Grohl, I would have to assume that he'd still be making music and he'd still be, fighting to be on the fringes rather than right in the middle, and would be angry at anyone that was wearing a Nirvana sweatshirt, I suppose.
What are your thoughts on those theories that say that he didn't commit suicide, that he was actually killed?
Yeah, I mean, I love a good conspiracy theory, but those puzzle pieces just don't fit to me. Like Yeah, I mean, like I said, I can get immersed in all that crazy stuff because I love it. It's like a fun mystery to read, and in this case, that is the case as well. I mean, it's fascinating to go, could that have happened, and could Courtney have been involved? And but in the end, yeah, I don't think it fits.
Man, I gotta be honest to you. I'm a huge grunge fan. Like I've read books. I traveled to the U.S. and I bought books that they don't translate to Spanish just to be able to learn a bit. I lived in Canada and I visited Seattle for like 2 nights, something like that. I was maybe 17 years old, and I went to the Kurt's Park, the bench next to, yes, just like for, it's back in the day without internet in my phone. So it was weird going there, but I.
Was the building still there? The outbuilding?
Yeah.
Oh, it was
Yeah, it was.
back there in the day.
It was 1999, if I recall correctly.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Maybe. So and I'm very happy of being able to talk to you. And since we're talking, and I'm not taking much longer of your time, and since we're talking about grunge, I delivered the news of Taylor Hawkins' death here in Colombia.
Oh my goodness! Wow, yeah.
Yeah, we were at the festival. We were broadcasting at the festival where the Foo Fighters were supposed to perform, and of course we were at a festival. There's no signal of any sort of internet at all, and we had already closed, like the broadcast. Where the festival was a 3-hour drive from the studios, but we had our little portable kind of thing, and I just saw Nile Rodgers perform. I had a few drinks and I went to see the Black Pumas. They were before Taylor Hawkins and the Foo Fighters, of course. And I remember a friend of mine went to get like a burger, a beer, or something like that. And the reception was better at, the restaurant zone. And when she came back, she showed me her phone, like, is this true? And I was like, nah, it's not, it can't be true. And they just premiered Studio 666 here in Colombia like 2 days before. So I thought, like, I'm gonna move the phone like this and it's gonna be a joke, like, but the spirits of the Foo Fighters are gonna be on stage in Colombia or whatever like that. And all of a sudden I start getting like 20, 30, 40 messages, boom, boom, boom on my WhatsApp. It was true. And I had to just run back to the portable studio and call a guy here at the main building who just lived like 2 blocks from the building. Like, I need you to go back to studio. We need to tell this story. And we sort of did a broadcast from the Festival Stereo Picnic with as little as information as we could have. It was only the post on the Instagram of the Foo Fighters. And it was weird, people gathering around the portable transmission. It was weird.
Yeah. Wow. Well, it's funny because just hearing you tell the story brings me back to that time. I mean, if you think about 1994, internet didn't exist, WhatsApp, none of that. So
Nothing.
So when you're saying that you went, this is a joke, so did we, but we couldn't spin the screen to the left or right to figure out if it was true. So we were really strangely isolated, wondering, does this make any sense? And of course, this is ridiculous. And so we had far more reasons to believe it was funny. Like you mentioned, what was it like afterwards? A couple months after, does VH1 have a footprint there in Colombia? So VH1 used to do a very popular show called Behind the Music. Does that ring a bell?
Yes.
I was a big fan, but they were doing one on Nirvana, and they contacted me and wanted to talk to me about, that day. And then the producer was saying to me, do you by chance have the audio of you making the announcement? And I'm like, yeah, that would have been cool if I never recorded myself. I hated having tapes of myself. So I didn't record that morning because I didn't think it was going to be anything different than any other morning. So the producer said, so what did you say? And I said exactly what I said here early on in the interview. I said, we have tentative reports. Seattle police have been dispatched. And she said, say it like you said it. And I said, okay. And I kind of said, so anyhow, then the show takes a while to get edited and produced. And so 3 months later, Behind the Music, Nirvana is going on the air. And I thought, oh, I'm going to watch this. I'm going to see if, how they put the story together. And at the very opening of that, they have my voice, crackling, little radio static going, tentative reports that the Kurt Cobain is. And I'm like, where did they find the recording? That's wild. And then it just took me a while to go. All they did was take me saying it in the interview, put some crackling noise. So they fooled a guy who's supposed to be in the industry and should know better.
What was the impact on Kurt's death on the music scene on Seattle?
Oh, I mean, yeah, even using the word grunge now, being from Seattle, you twitch a little bit because there was such a blowback. Like, again, as soon as it became commercially viable and everyone around the world was into grunge was no more, because grunge was the opposite, was the antithesis of commercial success. And so when Kurt died, it marked in the sand a line that times have changed, that the Seattle music scene, though I have to say still carries on and does quite well, it will never be that time again.
I agree, man. Well, Marty, thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure having this time with you. And well, if you ever come down south, please let me know.
I would love that. I immediately, as soon as you reached out, I went on Google Maps and I looked at where your studio was located. So now I kind of have, just so that visually I could be in the right mindset talking to you. So, and just the background there looks cool. So I don't know if that's
Well, you should come by, and your wife already speaks Spanish, so it should be easier.
It'd be fantastic. We will definitely look you up. Thanks so much, Julio, and hello, Bogota.
Thank you very much, Marty. Have a very nice day.
All right, take care.
Thank you.